All right. Well, this goes straight back to you, Elizabeth. You pitched your story about the photo series, not story, but photo series about women in Congress to the New York Times, and they bought it. They agreed to. Now, do they fund it? Is that like they paid for it?
Yeah, this would not be something that, and also as a freelancer, this would not have been something that I would have been able to feasibly convince members of Congress to sit for portraits I personally think that I would not have been able to do that. It really needed the weight of a publication, and it needed the weight of a team that could, logistically coordinate this. So, yeah. So I went to them with an idea that I have sort of spoken about the genesis of the idea a good number of times, and I cannot tell you the moment where the idea came into my mind. I know the two things that sort of informed it the most was I was shadowing AOC on the election night that was pretty guaranteed that she was going to be elected, not the giant upset in the primary that she was in. So I was shadowing her that night and throughout the full day, and was just sort of struck by how different she looked in political spaces. She was doing all the sort of stereotypic political day of election activities. So going to our voting location and voting and meeting kids and speaking with voters on the street, doing all these things that we've seen politicians do forever, but she looked so visually different and had such a different background from politicians that you were used to seeing. So that was one component. In the previous year, I'd been at the National Portrait Gallery and seen all the presidential portraits. And you walk through that room and it's really striking. You notice that it's all sort of older white guys, and they're all portrayed visually in a similar way. And you have Barack Obama, but it's still all men. And you walk through and it's this idea of how power is visualized in this country. And it really sort of hits you that we are sort of conditioned to seeing power as being able to be occupied visually this one way. So those two ideas at some point formed in my mind. And I wrote this pitch to photograph members that represented shifts in representation. So new members in the style of historical portrait paintings. And I sent that to Marissa Swartz-Taylor she's the DC editor at the Times. And separately, she and Beth Flynn, who's the deputy director of photography, had been having conversations about how to visualize the new class of women in Congress. It was going to be, for the first time ever, over 100 women serving in the House. Women are almost 25% of Congress at this point, or would be once the 116th was sworn in. So they had been having that conversation separately at the paper, which I didn't know about. And I sort of came to them with this concept. And so they took the idea. They wanted to take the idea and not just photograph new members, but photograph all the women. So Marissa came back and said, I really like the concept, but I think we should do all the women. And so I have done portraiture. I've worked with the Times a bunch, but I had not done political portraiture. And I had never done a project of this scale. And so it was a little frightening for sure. And also, I think the budget that I originally proposed was very, very low. I was going to crash on a friend's couch and go down. I originally pitched to shoot it on film to kind of have the historic. But it was and then all of a sudden, we were renting 2 studio setups and hiring assistants. And so it became a very different thing. So it went from this sort of this concept to what was going to cost a lot of money. And if it failed, I felt very responsible. So, and at that point, Marissa brought on a second photographer, Celeste Lohman, who's done a ton of celebrity portraits. So and as a portraitist, you really don't get to work with another portraitist a lot of the time. So it's part of what was amazing about the experience was getting to literally be in the same room shooting at the same time as someone else. And so, but the actual, so if I'm happy to talk more about the actual pitch or about the process of getting it greenlit or taking the pitch to fruition, whatever is the most helpful.
I think the concept of the pitch is what I think would be most valuable to know. I mean, obviously, the experience is great, and I definitely want to delve into that a little bit. But developing a pitch for a major news organization, like if I had an idea, right, where is even the first place I start? Do I have to build a slide deck in PowerPoint? Do I just call up somebody? Who do I call? I don't
Yeah.
know anybody at the New York Times. Do I send an email? Do I just, where do I even start if I have? Where do I go from idea to like pitching it to getting a pitch that's actually going to be greenlit? And that can go, again, to all of you too. You can chime in on your experiences as well after Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think it varies so much depending on whether you're going with a finished product or whether you're going with an idea to be sort of shot, and why you're going with one versus the other. So in this case, this was a project that would only be feasible with the backing of a publication. And I think that the things that I thought about in developing this pitch,
I just want to, I don't want to, but not just for money, but also for credibility, right?
I think
it's one thing for like
more.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to say like, hey, I'm really motivated and I want to shoot, I want to take photographs of female congressmen. Like, great. And you are, and like, or you can go like, I'm with the New York Times. Oh, I'm listening. Yes. Right.
Well, and part of the thing, I'm a freelancer. I don't have an official email address. So when I was setting up some of the appointments, it was, even though we had a letter, like a call sheet on a letterhead, it still took a couple of tries. And for some of the members, getting someone from the paper to send the email instead, because my email is not going to get the same. So that's 100% definitely a credibility thing.
Blaze it XXX69 is not going to get the same sort of traction that Elizabeth Herman at New York Times is going to get.
And so having some of the editors do some of the higher level scheduling was really important because I think that the thing that the pitch, all the advice that I've ever gotten on pitching ever is that you should do it because editors, especially editors that are really interested in sort of doing more in-depth projects, more sort of thoughtful visual stories, either as related to the news of the day or more feature pieces. They want pitches. They want well thought out pitches. They want pitches that won't sort of inundate their inbox. So be selective in what you are pitching and who you're pitching it to. Make sure it's tailored to the publication that you're pitching it to, so that you maybe are referencing the vertical that it's going to run in, or you're saying it's similar to this previous thing that you've done. Why is it a good fit for this publication? And then why you, as a photographer or as a person, are specifically qualified to do this project. So what unique skills or unique experience do you have that can help you do this project is sort of the advice that I've gotten. And the format that I use is just sort of, there's a line, one sentence summary, sort of the elevator pitch version, and then a paragraph, that's it, explaining the reason. In this case, it was the sort of historical references, the concept, and then a paragraph of logistics. So what is the budget? How many days? What's the approach? And then I included, in this case, the historical reference images. So, I think I had a portrait of Washington and Jefferson and I can't remember who the third one was. I think Eisenhower. And that was sort of the visual approach. And the idea was that we would replicate that in the photographs.
Cool.
How many, in your own work, how much do you have you work on assignment to what you actually kind of pitch? What's the balance of that?
I have not been pitching I was much more proactive in pitching a few years ago, but as I've been sort of in dissertation writing phase, this was the first pitch that I'd sent. I've in the past had done a lot of sort of grant writing and pitching projects to sort of granting organizations, not so much to publications. But then, this is the first pitch that I'd worked on in I think about a year. And it was a pretty hectic time to begin with, but this idea came and I was like, I'm going to feel crummy if I don't write this up.
It's obviously the initial pitch was very different in your mind and the scope of it grew so much. How much has that changed what you would now pitch and what you're dreaming of doing next? And it affected, what's you're going to be doing onward from this point? That's
a really good question. I think, part of it was that because this sort of was the first project that I was able to, I've done sort of longer term documentary projects on my own in the past. So I knew that I could do production and I could do a lot of the legwork, but I didn't know that that was something that you could take to editors and say, I'm happy to help with the production. I'm happy to help with the research. I always thought that that was sort of something that you'd do on the DL, or I'd done that in daily assignments, but not sort of as pitching it as part of my skill set to publications. And that's something that I think that there are many photographers that are much better photographers than I am. And I'm happy, but I think that I have other skill sets that make me qualified in different ways, that I can bring research background, or I could bring sort of a production background, these sorts of things that can make me maybe a better fit for certain assignments, even if there's a photographer that has like or is better fit in other ways. So I think it's really about figuring out how you as a photographer are qualified. So to your question, I think that I would feel more comfortable pitching bigger projects that might have more research or production involved, because just to say that, and I'm happy to help on these things, that this could be part of what I'm working with you on, or this is part of the package that comes with me when you hire me.
What was your initial, on this pitch, your biggest takeaway that you would give to someone that, wow, I pitched it this way, but going forward, I realized this is, I would change it, and I would recommend this is what you need to do going forward on a pitch?
That's an interesting question. I think that making sure that this wasn't in the actual pitch that I wrote up. This was sort of in the follow-up conversations that Marissa and I had. But I tried to make clear that I was happy to help with the legwork. I think that was something that sort of was a big part of because we were approaching the holidays. They were working on a lot of enterprise projects already. It was something that was not, I think I was more active in following up than I might have been in the past. And I think that was important. Yeah. I think important is to give space and be respectful and know that there's a whole process that a publication has to go through on their own. But I think that, I was trying to still do anything that could be helpful. So like I started putting together a spreadsheet of all the members as soon as we started finding out whether that it was a possibility. I was like, I want to move as many of the barriers as possible to this getting approved. So I think that including more of those in the original thing, I think that I was really lucky that Marissa was really believed in it and really ushered it through this process. But I think that if you don't have that, then making sure that you are sort of making it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Something that is important.
Oh, awesome.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, as a freelancer, when you pitch a story, how do you, I don't know if you avoided it, but like, how do you, not sign maybe the contract where your images are going to be given to Redux for resale, or how do you negotiate those kind of sticky points?
They were given to Redux for resale.
Okay.
The times just, I think that, I think it depends on the publication. The Times actually has a really good resale. So when we went to then turn this into a book, they were very protective, and they made sure that we were treated very, like that we, were compensated and we were paid for, I think a lot of photo books you have to pay to get made. That was not the case for the photo book that we negotiated.
In conjunction with the New York Times.
Yeah, the Times actually negotiated the book contract and all that. So I think that, it depends. I think it's about any contract. The Times' contract I signed in 2012. It was like a long time ago. And I'm, you always get paid whenever your photo gets sold, but I think that one thing that's hugely important that I've always tried to be careful about is reading all of the resale information in the contracts whenever I sign them. And I've gotten more, I think more people redline contracts and send them back. And sometimes it's not negotiable. Sometimes publications will come back, but a lot of the time publications will come back and say, okay. And you just have to, I do that a lot with confidentiality clauses, because I think that's a lot of how harassment stuff was perpetuated for a long time, was that people were signing confidentiality clauses and they weren't able to go to anyone. I just finished reading Catch and Kill, so.
There you go. Another
Interesting. Talking about photo rights, since the New York Times put up the money for this, do you own the rights to your images, or do they own the rights to your images?
So we both own the copyright. It's a shared copyright with the Times.
Okay.
And that's the case.
So essentially they can use it for whatever they want, but you can also do whatever you want with it.
So whenever they, yeah, and I don't have to, they have an embargo period that's, I don't know the exact number of days, but it's days, not weeks. And then you can resell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And have you resold them?
The images with this project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're trying to do a few different, there's been either, the conference came and they said, we're featuring the new members. We want to feature these portraits. So Celeste and I will often, because we have half and half basically, ended up working out that we shot more than half each because we got some shoot some of the same people, both of us. But so we'll kind of work together and sell a package together.
Was there one person that you didn't get to shoot? You're like, darn it, I wanted to shoot them.
I wanted to shoot everybody, but it just physically was not
feasible.
Yeah, of course. But so I think we would say we each got to photograph about 85, 90 members. So there's a lot of overlap between, especially the second, we shot over 2 weeks, 1 week in December, 1 week right after the new year. And the second week, especially once we got the sort of system down, we were able to sort of like make eye contact and be like, oh, and now we have another setup for you to go and be photographed on. So, yeah.
Interesting. So it's like, it was your idea, your pitch, but it became bigger than you to the point where other people were doing essentially your idea, right?
Well,
under the umbrella of New York Times.
It sort of became this, I went with the original concept, but then it became this project that, I think that was one of the best things was as a freelancer, you don't get to work, or at least I don't get to work collaboratively. I don't work on teams a lot of the time. I work individually with an editor, but the editor is not in the field with me. So I think that that was one of the best parts was that it was this team. We had 2 editors, 2 photographers, we had 2 assistants, it was just like this. And then all the design team at the paper, the web design team, the print design team. And then when it became a book, it was a whole other. So I think that was one of the best. I've gotten that question a couple times about did you feel weird letting go of your idea? I was like, at some point it's no longer your idea. It's the group's concept and the group sort of work together, which was great.
It had to be like that because, like you said, you couldn't do it on your own. So that was the only way it was going to get done. So,
yeah.
Any difference or similarities in either of your 2 experiences, Travis or Evelyn, in terms of pitching projects to prospective buyers?
Nothing.
Certainly. I've definitely dealt with a bunch of that, where, collaborative efforts and big productions and stuff like that. And stuff grows into stuff. And I'm mainly a solo shooter, but when I get to work on these huge projects with, assistants and lighting and people filming me doing it and, hair and makeup and all this wonderful stuff, it's a lot of fun. It's like your own little Hollywood movie. You get to shoot, and it's the same type of thing. You come up with a concept, but it takes the actors to bring it to life and the lighting people, and it becomes bigger than you, and it's pretty amazing too. That you have an inception idea, and then it grows into something that even you didn't quite see, and larger than what you thought. And sometimes a lot, like someone brings some a little nugget that suddenly it becomes this bigger entity than you even came up with. So it's I love the whole process, and that's I think why I'm a photographer. Is that you can literally take your camera and go out and be solo, or you can work with tons of people and be as collaborative as you want, and that's what makes it so fun and dynamic. As a profession for me.
Yeah.
I think Elizabeth, you hit on something interesting as a freelancer, which sometimes I miss. When you work as a freelancer, even if you shoot a big story, you don't necessarily get the same amount of web designers, graphic designers, layout people working on your package that maybe a staff photographer would get. And that for me it's so rewarding when they put the whole team on something and you get this amazing iPhone presentation and web presentation. So I think that would be, that's worth a lot, that team effort and turning something, just the visual image into something, a package that's so much bigger than you can do as a photographer. But I haven't I pitch stories, but usually it's in collaboration with one writer, and we just go out and do the stories. So,
Yeah.
question, Dave. Yeah.
I usually just pitch stories to my wife in terms of family photo shoots, and then she vetoes all of them and does what she wants to do. So I'm like, okay, happy wife, happy life.
Bosses.
Indeed. Gotta please the boss. Let's move on to our last topic this evening. We're talking about